We began this class studying Rabbi Steinsaltz's 30 Petalled in order to also bring, not just to delve into his teachings and to connect to him and his brilliance, but also in order to bring healing to Rabbi Steinsaltz. We began this after he suffered a stroke 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, a year and 11 months ago. And his speech has been very, very limited since then. So the belief, which is based, of course, on Kabbalah, the belief is that when you talk someone's words, those words are then replanted in that person's mouth, and he's able to gain the power of speech once again, because that's what we're doing. So through speaking his words, the power of speech is being transferred back to him. It's his word. So we started this class speaking his words, and hopefully that will bring healing to his speech and to his entire self, hopefully. But in addition to that, I'd also like, based on Gila's suggestion, I'd also like to start the classes, before we actually delve into the text, with a psalm that speaks of healing, or in general, of health, and of the different qualities and attributes that every person should really actualize. And we know that the words of the book of Psalms really carry their own power. So I'd like to start off the classes with a psalm. But it's not just any psalm, it's actually a psalm that apparently the Rabbi Steinsaltz and the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, his mentor, spoke about. How did they speak about the psalm? This is his son shared this just about a week ago. One day, Rabbi Steinsaltz was in Brooklyn, New York, and he was by the headquarters of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, blessed memory. And he was walking in the street, and then the Rebbe came out of his car into his headquarters, and he notices Rabbi Steinsaltz. So he calls him. And he called him, and Rabbi Steinsaltz was completely unprepared for this. But he went, and they spoke for 45 minutes on the footsteps. Many people still speak about that scene. You know, it's unusual for the great Rebbe to call someone. Yes, Rabbi Steinsaltz is also great, but to speak to him for 45 minutes, he's on his way on the footsteps of the headquarters. The big question is, what did they speak about? And no one knows until this day. I tackled it myself, Rabbi Steinsaltz, with this question, and didn't get an answer. But Amichaya says that he also doesn't know what they spoke about during the entire 45 minutes, but he does know that they touched upon this psalm that I want to read and maybe speak about just a little bit before we begin the 30 Petalled. In a way, because, not just because, as we said, that the power of the words of the Psalms can open up the gates of heaven and really answer our prayers, but also because this is a psalm that was already discussed by two greats. So on top of the power of those words, we also add the holiness of these two giants, and that in of itself will hopefully bring him, Rabbi Steinsaltz, complete healing, and will bring his power of speech back. So, but this is Psalm 45, that apparently, according to Amichai again, they were speaking about. This psalm is actually a psalm that describes Mashiach and the King Messiah who will come and redeem the Jewish people. It speaks about his glory, his wealth, his reign, his attributes, and it also speaks about his speech. So, in a way, there's a hint here to the power of speech that we are hoping Rabbi Steinsaltz will regain. So I'm going to say this, these words have their own power, so I'm going to say them, maybe just explain one sentence, one verse each time. So this is the verse, this is the chapter itself. I'll say it in Hebrew, and again, we're dedicating this for the full and speedy recovery of Rabbi Steinsaltz. Alright, okay, let's continue here with holiness. The chapter here on holiness, I think we were up to, towards the end of the chapter. Up to page 58 or 59, if I'm not mistaken. Right? So just to recap very quickly, the big idea, of course he said so much more, but what Rabbi Steinsaltz was saying is that really the holiness of God is experienced through three realms in this world. The realm of Olam, Shana, Nefesh, which is a very deep Kabbalistic concept, but Olam, Shana, Nefesh really speak of the realm, the first realm is Olam, which is the world itself. So there are places in the world that are considered holy, like Jerusalem. In fact, the Holy Temple is where God's holiness is channeled through in this world. So you have parts of the world that are holy, and sometimes when we can make places holy by drawing God's presence to those places, like we did in this place. I know we're saying goodbye to this place. Next class, by the way, will be in the new building. So that's very exciting news. But this place now has holiness. So in a way, we made this realm holy. This part of the world holy. So there's that realm of holiness. There's the realm of time, which also has segments of holiness. So there are designated times in which God says these times are holy. The festivals we just celebrated Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Simchat Torah. These are times that were designated by God as holy times. Shabbat is also a holy day, and there are moments. So when you celebrate a wedding, that moment in which the bride and the groom are marrying, that moment is holy. Or whether you're doing a mitzvah again, that moment is a holy moment. So time can also be consecrated. Time can also be holy. Sometimes it's humanly designed. Sometimes it's divinely designed. And then the final realm of holiness is the human beings themselves. The soul that we have is holy. Olam Shana Nefesh. And each time we are guided by our souls, we are drawing down that holiness through that soul and making ourselves holy. The tzaddikim, the righteous people in the world, are always guided by the souls, are always listening to God in them, to the God in them, so to speak, to that holiness in them, and therefore they become holy. Their entire entity becomes holy because they are but channels to their souls, to God's word in them, and that makes them holy. So sometimes we have just sporadic sparkles of holiness. Sometimes, if we're righteous, then our whole being becomes holy through that soul that God designated as holy. So these are the three realms that he spoke about. I think we're right now in the realm still of festivals, of cycles of time, and soon he's going to speak much more about those righteous people and those nefesh, those nefashot, those souls that are holy and can turn a whole person, a whole human being into holy if we can follow it, if we can follow the holiness within us. So that's it. Does anyone remember exactly where we were up to? 59? Oh yeah, 58. 58. The cycles of the month and the year. Okay. By the way, the Jewish calendar is very unique because of this. The Jewish philosophy on time is very unique because of this. Because we're not just a lunar or nation that follows the lunar calendar like Muslims. That's why the Ramadan can fall in the middle of the summer and in the middle of the winter. Because the lunar calendar is much shorter, and if you continue on with it, then you'll have your holidays at different seasons of the year. But we don't follow the solar calendar, the Gregorian calendar. And that's why we really have to adjust our calendars every 2 to 3 years. This year, by the way, this coming year is going to be a leap year. A leap year means that we've added an additional month. Why? Because essentially we do follow the lunar calendar, but we also follow the solar calendar, which is what Rabbi Allouche is saying here. And that is that we follow the lunar calendar on a day-to-day basis, but from time to time we have to adjust that lunar calendar so that it matches more or less the solar calendar. Why do we care whether it matches the solar calendar? Practically, it's because, before we speak of the mystical reason, practically it's because some of the festivals have to take place during specific seasons. For example, Passover. The Torah says that Passover should take place Chag Aviv, during the festival of spring, or the season of spring. Now, if we only follow the lunar calendar, then Passover, the season of spring, of course, is dependent on the sun. On the solar calendar, has 4 seasons, not the lunar calendar. The lunar calendar has different seasons, but the festival of Passover can fall in the summer if we only follow the lunar calendar. It can fall in the winter. It won't follow during the spring. And therefore we have to adjust that lunar calendar every 2 to 3 years, and we add another year. But mystically, and that's where Rabbi Steinsaltz is going to over here, the reason we follow also both calendars is because, in a way, yes, we are people of the moon, But essentially, we're also people of the sun. What does that mean? So we are people of the moon, that we designate our months based on the appearance of the moon. The appearance of the moon connotes the beginning of the month. When the moon wanes down, that means we know it's the end of the month, and then when it reappears, it's the beginning of the month. In the times of the temple, by the way, in the times of the great Sanhedrin, in the year about 300 BCE, what they would do in Israel, the Talmud has many, many pages that speak about this, but they would have people dispatched all around Israel, on the mountaintops of Israel, to see towards the end of the month who can see if the moon has appeared yet in the sky. The minute there was someone, a witness, that saw the appearance of the moon in the sky, they would have to run to the Sanhedrin, to the great court, rabbinic court, and tell them, we saw the moon. And they would be questioned, well, did you really see the moon? Or they want to know that they actually saw the moon, and not a star, or not a flying star, or whatever it may be in the sky, not a galaxy. They would question them and question them and question them, and after they determined that they actually did see the moon, then they would declare to everybody, Rosh Chodesh has come, the new month has come, let's flip over our calendars and start this next new month, because someone is a witness that actually saw the moon. So we would now, thank God, thanks to mathematics, we're able to calculate exactly when the moon will reappear, and therefore there's no need, of course, for witnesses to be dispatched in the land of Israel, but still, we follow the moon very meticulously. The solar calendar we follow in a more distant way. It's not as important to us. That once every 2-3 years, again, we add a month so that we can be more or less adjusted to the solar calendar. What this really means, what is the moon? The moon is a receiver. The moon receives the light of the sun. When we see the moon shining at night, right, it's the sun shining, not the moon shining, of course. So it receives. What is the sun? The sun is a giver. In the words of Kabbalah, they call it Mein Nukvin and Mein Duchrin. The moon is compared to water that receives, and the sun is compared to water that gives. There's water that receives, like ponds, rivers. There's water that gives, like springs, right? Like waterfalls. Or like rain. We just experienced 3 days of rain. That's water that gives. The Jewish people are people that receive on a daily basis. That's what we ought to do. That's our mission in the world. Yet from time to time, if we are only in a state of receiving, we can become very passive. So God tells us you have to give also. You have to adjust yourself to the sun and become a giver. What does that mean? The person that receives is a person that listens to God's messages all the time. He's a person that knows that when he lives, he doesn't live based on what he wants. He lives based on the message that he receives, on what God wants. That's who we are as a people. We don't ask what I want, we ask what is wanted of me, what is needed of me. That's the moon in us. And that's why we follow the moon meticulously. We have to be the receivers like the moon that receives from the sun. And by the way, just like the moon, it's interesting. Sometimes we'll receive a lot of light, sometimes we won't receive much light. But even when we don't receive light, we still have to receive. We still have to have that mentality. Now, if we stay too much in the receiving mode, then we lose ourselves. Then our uniqueness can be completely crushed, because it's always, it's like, it happens, there's a verse in the Song of Songs, a beautiful verse, composed by King Solomon, that says, Samuni no tegata karamim karmi sheli no hatarti, which means they placed me as the keeper of vineyards, but my own vineyard I did not keep. Sometimes you're always receiving messages and you're acting upon them, of course, but then your true self gets lost in this. So sometimes you have to go back to yourself and say, well, I've done so much, but is it really in line with who I am? That's the sun that comes once every 2 years, or once every 2-3 years. That's a solar calendar that we have to adjust ourselves to. To ourselves, that shows us what type of light we're supposed to be. I think we find that in a lot, to simplify this big idea, we find that a lot. Maybe you find that among yourselves, but you find that a lot in people that are always listening to what they ought to do, right? Listening to what the world wants from them, but sometimes they lose themselves through that listening. So you have people who are there in Africa helping the world, but they've lost themselves by ignoring maybe their families, or by ignoring that son of theirs, that's UN. Um, there's a lot of receiving to do in life and acting upon receiving, but it cannot come instead of your true self, that sun that you have within you. So that's the big idea. Those are the waters that receive and the waters that give. Most of the world is composed of waters that receive, again, leading to the fact that that's how what we have to be. That's how God wants to design the world. We have to be able to listen to those messages all the time and act upon them. But from time to time, God also shows us a waterfall, a spring that gives, to remind us that you too have to be in tune with this sun, with this giver, with this unique giver, this unique identity. I hope I'm clear. But I want to add one more thing also, and that is that the moon, as we said, is a reflection of the sun. It doesn't have a light in and of itself, which also alludes to the Jewish people, its mission in the world, that we are but reflectors. We don't have our own light. We are but reflectors of God's light. We have no right in saying, well, this is my truth, and that's what, I think in our society, it's like the biggest oxymoron I've ever heard. If you just think about it for a split second, you don't need to be clever to understand that. But people say, well, yeah, if you want to follow your truth, then you can follow your truth. My truth is different, but your truth is absolute, isn't it? So how could it be yours? If it's yours, it's also mine. If it's mine, it's also yours. We can't have two separate truths. If the grass is green, it's green. I can't say, well, your truth is that it's purple, my truth is that it's pink. Sorry, what is the absolute truth? If it's the absolute truth, it belongs to everybody. So, in a way, we as a people know that the absolute truth is God. So I can't come and say, well, I think that my truth is a little bit different than what God is telling. No, we're only reflectors. We're like the moon. That's why we follow the moon so meticulously, to remind us that, I'm sorry, yes, you might think one thing, but if God thinks something else, if God says don't murder and you want to murder, I'm sorry. There's a truth that we have to reflect. That's our purpose as Jews. That's why God chose us as the kingdom of priests. What are priests? Mamlechet Kohanim. And that's why we have to adjust ourselves every 2 to 3 years. Well, am I doing it? Am I reflecting God's Son through my own unique tools that God gave me, that God gifted me with? Or am I doing it by not being myself? God is absolute truth. God and His teachings and the Torah is absolute truth. And there's no question, at least from Judaism's perspective, there's no question on what those teachings are. Do not murder, again, do not murder. Respect your parents is a very strict guide of what it means to respect your parent. So we have our truths that are absolute. They're not just our truths, therefore they're everyone's truth that we believe in. How do I relate to people who come and tell me the truth is relative? I would say this. I think that the problem, and this, from my perception, I think people say the truth is relative only when convenient. When inconvenient, they'll immediately retort to saying, oh no, you're right, the truth is absolute. So if I go to that extreme example that I just used, if I go, well, do not murder, right? I think that's an absolute truth. It comes from the 10 Commandments. God was very clear about the commandment. And I'll tell the person, you know what? From my perspective, my truth says that if I kill someone in order to donate his organs, then that killing is justified. And then I've said that to people. I said, so let me go kill your son. And because my truth says that he's more, he would contribute more to society through his organs, then people say, no, that's not what I meant. So you use an extreme example to disprove them. But again, most people, from my experience, that use that argument, the truth is relative, use it for convenient reasons. When it's inconvenient, then they have nothing else to say. But I want to say one more thing about this moral relativism and so on. And that is that the problem is this, and I think that's where it comes from, that we live in a very I-centered society. It's me, and my truth, and the way I feel. the problem with an I-centered society is not so much that it's a very selfish society and a very, very, therefore, what's the word, very conflicting society. A society where harmony can't take place anymore, because if I have my truth and you have your truth and they conflict, then we really can't live together. That's not so much the problem. The problem is that, and we'll see it soon with the story of the flood, it's coming not this Shabbat, but the following Shabbat, is that if it's an I-centered society and not a God-centered society, an I-centered society is a society that eventually dehumanizes people. Because it's a society that eventually will be forced to compare truths and somehow categorize them. It's happened throughout history. You know, as of late, the Nazis, that's what they did. My truth is not the Jewish truth. My truth is higher than the Jewish truth. And therefore I can go and kill Jews, eventually. And that's a society that starts to be very self-destructive. So it's not just the selfishness, but it's what comes after that. A God-centered society is a society where everyone is equal. We'll read that in this week's portion. God made everyone with the divine image. He created everyone with the divine image. And that's a society, therefore, that can live in harmony and that actually achieves the opposite, not destruction, but construction. And I know that I'm here for the same purpose as you are here, to reflect God. Then we can work together and we can build together. But that's really the problem. You know, I would encourage people that think that truth is relative to think of what the next step is. And they'll see that the next step, unfortunately, is destruction, self-destruction. You might disagree with me. If you do, please feel free to do so. But I think history has proven that time and time and time again. But there he speaks about how religion is good for society, and he has again in the book. But he brings all sorts of experiments. For example, that people who are in dark rooms cheat more than are put in the back burner and say, "Oh, 1 second, I'm accountable yet to something greater than me." So how many can build together? The people that are I-centered, it's not so much the moral relativism, which is terrible. I think that's when also science crosses into a border that is prohibited for it. Say, what is this table? But it can't say, why is this table? And because you somehow replace, the why becomes a scientific question. Portion, it's all connected. This week's portion, God says that He created 2 big lights. Light for the night, which is the moon. So Rashi and many other common lights. That's a lie. One of them was big, one of them was small. He says so, God says so after that. No, I want to make you a small light and I'll let the sun be the king. And that's how the moon places like that. Then the moon will be as large as the sun. But the moon was punished. Kabbalistically, how is this connected? It's connected because exactly of what we speak. That we have to be driven, guided by what God wants, not what I want. Reflective. And in a way, that's why, again, we follow this moon. 2 synagogues. One synagogue, as it was unfortunately in his time, said, I'm going to pray with the common people. And they asked him, how could you pray with those people? They fight together. He tells about these arrogant people. They're too selfish. There's no room for me. I can't dwell. Purity. Like, in spite of their impurity, God is there with them. So he says, I came to this village, and again, Baal Shem Tov revolutionized the Jewish world by teaching us that, might violate laws of the Torah. But if at the end of the day you know that you're pious, you might think that you've never violated anything, but you have this arrogance, you are living is based on the cycle of the moon. To remind us of that. It's interesting, but what's also called Chama in Hebrew. So what's dark? Cham really means heat. Heat is red. Red can have purity. So the moon reminds us that if we too can reflect, the most important thing is to be God's reflectors of light in this world. He says, Rabbi, please help me wherever I go. People stepping all over me. Our ego is so big that we feel as if, we are being stepped over. I once asked Rabbi Steinsaltz if he ever gets insulted by people, because every great spirit will always be, I don't know if I'm quoting word for word, you might know this. A lot of positions. I once asked Rabbi Steinsaltz if he gets insulted, and his expression was, I'm not hot air, I'm just doing God's work. People who have this hot air, if they have a problem, they can complain to God. Many words for God. Hashem is one of the words that, if we call him by his other names, it only reflects one aspect of God. The people mention the name out of respect of Hashem, but by saying the name out of respect, to not mention God's name in vain. It's a good question because it has a halakha to Hashem, more than verbally, but also in a written way. When you say Hashem, saves you from. As I said, in 2 weeks, and everyone is welcome, by the way. This Shabbat will be our first Shabbat there. You can come.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's awesome time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Have an easy move.
I know.
Their best.
Thank you so much.
And